Welcome to episode 54 of Junk Filter. My name is Jesse Hawken, and my guest is one of the hosts of Chapo Trap House. Joining me from the greatest city in the world, the town so nice they named it twice, from New York, welcome Will Menaker.
Hello, hello. Glad to be here. What's going on?
Well, we're talking about the god Paul Schrader. He's our subject for today. He's given us so much over his long career, and now at age 75, he's delivered what I think is one of his best films. His 25th film as a director, The Card Counter, starring Oscar Isaac. I almost said Isaac Hayes.
That's Escape from New York.
Will and I are going to talk about this film and about the man himself, one of the most underrated filmmakers in America. I think you agree, Will?
Yeah, definitely. We'll get into the reasons why, but a lot to say.
And he's also the god of Facebook posting. He's like one of the only reasons why you should still be on Facebook, is to see Paul Schrader's daily updates.
Or you could just follow the Twitter account that collates all of them for you.
That's true.
I mean, this is a big problem with the Card Counter, or at least, the marketing of the movie, is that a lot of people thought this would be a movie about counting cards. But it's not really about that. It's more about a guy who got kicked out of a celebrity Facebook poker group for spitting too many grim and brutal truths and being horny.
A friend of mine pointed out that what he loves about Schrader is that he manages to keep all his insane Facebook beliefs out of his actual filmmaking.
I think apparently he said the hardest part of doing promo for this movie is that whoever produced whatever the studio was just don't go on Facebook anymore, don't say anything, just stop speaking, and we'll take care of the marketing of the movie.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I have the exact quote that made the people at Focus Features jump out of their chairs and immediately contact him. The Card Counter is a great jumping off point for two of the most important film concepts for me these days. And these are both concepts that you in particular have hugely influenced my thinking on, Will. I would like for you to explain to my listeners these two concepts, the first being movie mindset.
Okay, movie mindset is sort of it's an arcane and occult form of knowledge that can be cultivated in oneself through the act of watching movies. And now, it's a little difficult. It's a little difficult to describe. How does one achieve movie mindset? How does one begin to better themselves through movies? And the simplest way I can describe movie mindset is you achieve movie mindset by watching movies. And so if you just start there, if you got movies you like, got movies you want to see, just watch them. Just spend, you could just, watch it one movie a day, watch 2 movies a day. You could watch a movie a week. If you are watching movies, you are achieving movie mindset. But you have to be watching the correct movies. And it's just basically are you achieving movie mindset or not depends on the movies that you were taking in and how you were watching them. And the only arbiter of what counts as movie mindset and not movie mindset is me. So I hold all the keys to self-betterment through movie watching.
I was thinking about movie mindset a lot while I was watching The Card Counter. One of the ways that I interpret movie mindset, as you describe it, is understanding the world that you live in is so difficult by actually functioning in it. But to get a real sense of the planet that you live on, movies will be your friend and will guide you through it.
Yeah, I mean, that's this is an idea developed after the fact. It's sort of because once you achieve movie mindset, a lot of things will begin falling into place for you, and that truths previously occluded will become clear. You will cease to see through this veil darkly, and you will begin to see clearly the hidden truths of this reality we live in, which is that. In a postmodern existence, in a media saturated and media mediated reality, movies are more real than reality. And that it is only through movies that we understand the present, and that to a large degree, it's the only way we can understand the future. Because I strongly believe on a certain level, all art, but movies in general, are sort of signals that are sent from the future that are broadcast into the past. That if your brain is vibrating on the correct movie mindset frequently, you can interpret the signs and wonders of our times to better understand the future, which is where we are all going to be living.
Quoting Criswell is always going to get points with me, Will. Here's an example of some movie mindset. So you're watching The Long Good Friday, which is one of the great films. And
Absolutely.
Bob Hoskins' character in that movie, his big plan to go legit is to take over the docklands in London and rebuild them so that London can host the future Olympics. That is the plot of The Long Good Friday, but that actually happened in the 2012 Olympics in London. Would it have happened without The Long Good Friday? I don't know.
A big part of the probably the most famous anime of all time, Akira, is that Tokyo hosted the 2020 Summer Olympics in the midst of utter social breakdown and apocalypse. And then the climax of that movie takes place in the dilapidated Summer Olympic Stadium.
So how did they know this in the late 80s?
They didn't know it, not consciously, but through a proto form of movie mindset, just called being a good artist and making good movies. I think you were able to, not consciously but subconsciously, receive transmissions from a future reality that is seeking to imprint itself on the consciousness of the present.
So we're going to go back to September 10th, 2001. I went to a movie theater to watch a little movie called Mulholland Drive that afternoon.
Wow. Okay.
So the next day, when the planes hit the World Trade Center and everyone was freaking out and not knowing what's going on, I was like, yeah, I saw Mulholland Drive yesterday.
And, really, which one of those things are more memorable? Because, I've forgotten a lot about 9/11. Did it happen? I don't know. What were those buildings? Not sure. But Mulholland Drive, I'll never forget that movie. I'll never forget what's behind Winky's Diner.
Yeah, like the going behind Winky's Diner was basically like the South Tower getting hit for a lot of people.
Yeah, because it conveys an emotional truth that in the present moment you're not fully aware of, or you don't have the frame of reference to truly process. But it is only through as events, as a totally predetermined events. By the way, if we're getting into Paul Schrader's Calvinist beliefs, it's only through a course of totally predetermined and inalterable events playing themselves out do we begin to understand the messages that were once being transmitted to us through movies and then interpreted through movie mindset, trademark Will Menaker, all rights and properties held in perpetuity.
I'll add the legal boilerplate to the show description. The other major concept of enjoying cinema to its purest, which I consider you one of the practitioners of, is the dude's rock concept. Like, it's an actual genre of film.
It's a broad genre. Like a lot, you can interpret basically any movie in which men are enjoying each other's company and having fun as a dude's rock movie. But if we're to dude's rock and movie mindset are very much intertwined. It's very hard to do one without the other. They both necessarily inform each other to form a holistic sense of well-being for the modern man in the 21st century. But kidding aside, it's like, I don't know. Watching movies with your friends and watching movies is a big part of my experience growing up and having friends and just becoming a teenager to a young man to a fully fledged dude. Movies form the texture of that, and similar to what I was saying about the future, provides sort of a template for how you develop into the person that you are. And I just think, dudes rock as sort of a half joking, sort of a form of positive masculinity, where it's just being a dude, being a guy, what's better than that? And what's better than being a guy among dudes watching movies about very much the same thing?
One important way that I like to describe dudes rock is that men are often in this world discouraged from being friends with the people they should be friends with.
Yeah.
And in a dudes rock movie, two men can become better men thanks to their friendship. A friendship that is going to improve both their lives. a purpose that they can finally have that's so difficult to put together by yourself, but is so much easier with your dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Think about, not to interrupt you, but think about The Killer, the John Woo film, which is one of the great dudes rock movies. Those guys spend like 2/3 of the movie trying to get each other. One's on the side of the law. One is a criminal. He's an assassin. Eventually, when they meet, they kind of become respectful of one another, and that respect turns into a friendship and finally into love.
Well, yeah, I mean, The Killer is a good example. I mean, a big part of dudes rocking is, of course, homoerotic subtext. One doesn't necessarily need to have it to rock, but it certainly helps. It's an added bonus.
Paul Schrader is one of the great dudes rock filmmakers. One of the key works in his filmography is his screenplay for Rolling Thunder, which is one of the ultimate dudes rock movies. William Devane comes back from Vietnam, shattered by the experience, along with his friend Tommy Lee Jones, who's not really in the movie all that much. Devane wins all these coins. He wins like $2,000 in gold coins. It's one of the like smallest stakes I've seen in a movie for what happens to him. These guys decide to get the money that they just gave to William Devane, so they kill his family. And they put his hand through a what's that kitchen garbage disposal machine?
Yeah, they fuck him up pretty bad.
They destroy his hand, and he winds up getting a hook for a hand. And when he finally figures out where the guys are that killed his family, he just goes to Tommy Lee Jones and says, "I found them, the men who killed my family." Tommy Lee Jones just looks at him and says, "I'll just go get my gear," and fills up his bag with guns, and the two of them drive down to Juarez, Mexico to destroy these people.
Yeah, and they kill like a dozen people in like a cat house in Juarez. Yeah.
But there's no talking Tommy Lee Jones into it. He just
Yeah.
that is what a true friend is. There's that old saying that a friend will help you move, but a true friend will help you move a corpse.
Yeah, but I mean, you bring up Rolling Thunder. I mean, that's Schrader. That was his first movie, right? I mean, his first movie directed. Yakuza was the first screenplay that he got made, right?
Yeah, he didn't direct Rolling Thunder. He wrote the screenplay.
He wrote,
and
the
it came out at 1 year after Taxi Driver. Which
okay,
of
but
course
it is
pure zeitgeist.
In a lot of ways, it's kind of like the same movie as Taxi Driver. It's about a Vietnam vet who's badly traumatized by the war. And it's about like, sort of like how does one be a man in this kind of like post-Vietnam context? And I think like Taxi Driver, it sets the template in motion for like a lot of his movies, including The Card Counter, up until the very present moment, which is like his movies are focused on acts of suicidal vainglory, like acts of sort of like vainglorious self-negation as a way of like dealing with it's just sort of intractable like evils and irresolvable dilemmas of like the modern world as it regards being a man in America.
There's a storm brewing in this man. They took his arm, they took his family, and his soul. His anger is building, and it's going to explode. Now, from Paul Schrader, the author of Taxi Driver, comes a new and shattering film about a man poised on the brink of violence. Rolling Thunder, starring William Devane as Charles Rain. He has a purpose. He has a plan. It's only a matter of time.
The other key dudes rock work of Schrader's is Blue Collar. That was his directorial debut. That is one of the greatest depictions of friendship I think there is.
Well, it's also about how capitalism makes dudes rocking impossible, or
Yes.
it sets dudes against one another through money and hierarchy and like economic necessity.
And the way that labor and management are not necessarily diametrically opposed to one another, that labor can be corrupt and that management can use the powers of labor to keep labor in its place.
Yeah.
It's a very Marxist film. It's a movie that actually Schrader kind of disowns now, which is too bad.
Really?
Yeah. He's not so crazy about it. Very apologetic commentary track for Blue Collar where you remember that scene in Blue Collar where Richard Pryor has the tax guy comes by to see his house and he's listed all these dependents? Schrader now says that scene is something he regrets because it sort of does the joke about the black people, having too many dependents and lying and stuff like that. I don't think he has anything to apologize for because it's a dark comedy drama, and Pryor is so good in that scene. I don't know what he has to be squeamish about.
Maybe he should apologize for that movie. He should apologize for that movie, including in it like one of the best tactics for cheating on your wife, which is when Harvey Keitel tells her that he left the gas station unlocked and he needs to go lock it up in the middle of the night, and then he just goes to Yaphet Kotto's house to party with him and Richard Pryor and three ladies of the evening and just sniff some blow, and then come back at like 7 a.m. being like, yeah, I got hung up at work, sorry, it's my second job.
I regret to inform you they were using real cocaine in that scene.
No way.
Yeah. And the other amazing thing about what a great Dudes Rock achievement Blue Collar is that Keitel, Cotto, and Richard Pryor hated each other's guts the entire time they were working.
Well,
they hated each other so much. They were all under the impression that they were the star of the movie, and they were discovering on the set that they weren't. And they had huge fights and screaming matches and like freaking out on Schrader. You would not know it from watching the movie. They look like great buds.
So like at the very end of the movie, when Keitel and Pryor get into it with each other, they finally like break down and just attack each other on the floor of the factory. Like you feel some realism in that moment.
Yeah. Another Dudes Rock movie that Schrader did was Autofocus.
Oh my God, yes. That movie is there has been no more searing or honest depiction of like male sexuality than in that movie. Like very, very few directors would come close to touching the grim and brutal truth of just sort of like just male sexuality and friendship like that movie does.
That is like new lows in homoerotic denial of super hetero guys.
Yeah. It's a group grope, Bob. It's a group grope.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing when they were both sitting on the couch jacking off next to each other. Yeah,
it's just such a dark movie.
Were they holding hands during that scene too?
God, I don't think so. But like, it just happens it just happens. It's like getting into a warm bath. It just happens, and then they're just there. You're with your boy, watching yourself have sex with other people on video, and then just jacking off. I mean, like, Autofocus is such a disturbing movie because it's like it's so hard to pinpoint. Like, at what point in that movie does Bob Crane completely lose his mind? Like, at what point does he truly like slide off the rails on an inexorable descent to hell? Because it's really hard to say when. Like, it all happens so good. I mean, it doesn't happen gradually, but like you're sort of there with him. You're like, yeah, just these are the ways in which men were like responding to the sexual revolution and like sort of discovering themselves, sexually, or responding to these new opportunities in the culture to sort of, express one's sexuality in a sort of what was advertised as like a freer way. But like, man, oh man, the road to hell is paved with, I don't know, not good intentions, but certainly understandable ones.
And this giant gulf that's growing and growing between Bob Crane's public persona and his private life.
Yeah.
Like this is all happening while he's on Hogan's Heroes, right?
Yeah. And like, what's like that like after he gets done with Hogan's Heroes, and it's like the really dark like last third of the movie, and he's doing like dinner theater, and they keep coming back to that line from this like cheesy murder mystery dinner theater show he's doing, where he's like the police, I've got things to hide, and they show him say that line like 2 or 3 times, and it's so fucking good.
We'll get into it when we get into the card counter, but I would include Card Counter as a Dudes Rock movie, even though it's a character study about, God's lonely man, Schrader's favorite subject. There's major Dudes Rock content in this movie and the boy that he takes under his wing. So Schrader, the first thing we have to say about him is that he's an auteur. And I want to talk a little bit about the auteur theory, the aspect of the auteur theory that I like the most, which is the idea that an auteur is a visual stylist who keeps making the same movie over and over again, in terms of their own personal style. And that how you track the evolution of an auteur as an artist is how they tell this story over and over again as they get older.
No, I mean, yeah, like I said, like the Card Counter is in a lot of ways like kind of the same movie as First Reformed, but First Reformed is kind of the same movie as Rolling Thunder. Like it just like he cycles like yeah you're like it's just he is elaborating on the same theme over and over again in his movies, but not in a way that's like boring or hack. It's like this is his life's like interest, and like this is what this is the. This is like the scalpel with which he like uses to like dissect the world as he sees it, and like I said, it is about like lonely men, and this kind of quite often getting obsessed with a much younger blonde woman, or in the case of Mishima, just the Emperor of Japan. But you can sub in the inciting incident, but it's usually on behalf of a much younger blonde woman or the Emperor of Japan. But it usually leads to, like I said, it culminates with like a spectacular act of violence and like sort of a grand suicidal gesture that is mostly impotent. And like that's the thing that like really strikes me about his movies. Like you see it in right there in Rolling Thunder. I mean, like the guy gets his wife's lover to fucking tie him up like they did at the Hanaway Hilton to just show him what it was like in a way that like he's dominating him, but like his wife is leaving him for this guy. It's a lot of psychology going on there, but like I think his movies are about rage at the rotten, like the morally and spiritually diseased state of the world, but ultimately like you're like the impotence and like the action that you have to. It's like it's sort of if you do nothing, like what does that make you? But like the acts that these men are compelled to do are ultimately ones of like impotence and are ultimately like suicidal gestures, basically, or like either completed in the case of Mishima, or this kind of like halfway like off ramp and to find a way to kill yourself without actually doing it.
And speaking of both Mishima and Rolling Thunder, again, there are other themes that carry over into the card counter that are the ideas of ritualized death and ritualized torture. Like in Rolling Thunder, he's getting his wife's lover to actually like put him in a stress position, which is what we see a lot happening in the card counter in Abu Ghraib.
Yeah. And like we were talking a little bit before we got on about hardcore and like his sort of Dutch Calvinist roots, and like a sort of a big tenet of the Calvinist faith is both like predetermination, but also the acceptance of the total depravity of mankind, the total, inalterable, and irredeemable depravity of human beings. And I think for Schrader, it's like, I mean, you can sort of like extend that one thing further to America itself. Like America is diseased and evil, and like it's just there's ultimately no changing it, and like what it leads people to are these kind of like desperate but ultimately futile acts of vengeance or violence, or just an explosion of something against like the not just like the vague forces that are making America evil, but like the actual people who have names and addresses who are doing it.
That's a good point. And, there's a sort of Old Testament level of judgment towards the depravity of man that Schrader fixates on in Taxi Driver and especially in Hardcore. But what I found even more chilling about the way that he deals with these things now is that this stuff is actually part of our world now. The First Reformed is a movie about a man in a crisis of conscience and of faith when he has to deal with the fact that like the earth is degrading and falling apart and God is not doing anything about it. And that even the role that he plays in society is ornamental, that he's the priest of a church that is basically a tourist attraction. He is basically, he's kind of blackpilled by this, one of the parishioners. It's a pregnant woman whose husband doesn't want her to have the baby because he's an environmental activist and he feels that it's wrong to bring a child into this world. And when the Ethan Hawke character speaks to him about that and even reveals his own loss and his own removal of children from the world in his own life, the guy's right. And it really starts to like sink in on his brain. Like this guy is actually correct about the things that he's angry about. And he winds up actually like going up against his own church, because the First Reformed Church is this symbolic church that played a role in the Underground Railroad. But it's basically underwritten by this mega church called the Abundant Life Church, which in itself is one of the many things in the portfolio of this complete monster. who's actually an environmental polluter, and that
like
the
a
church is
Koch brother, essentially.
Yeah, and that the church is the sort of thing that he can hold up as a hostage if he ever got in trouble for his crimes, to say, what do you mean I'm a terrible person? Look at this church that I support.
I was very struck by that, the dialogue between Ethan Hawke and the young man who, it doesn't want to have a child because of, how apocalyptic, like the apocalyptic terms in which he sees the world. And Ethan Hawke reveals that, again, the specter of the war on terror and the Iraq War is really a pall that is over all of his most recent films. And I think he's really one of the only contemporary American filmmakers that goes right at it. He goes straight for the throat about the Iraq and the war on terror, and as we'll see in the card counter, Abu Ghraib, which comes up in a bunch of his other movies as well. But when he says if you think the tragedy of bringing a child into this world is bad, try the tragedy of having brought one into this world and then living through their death. And his son died in the war in Iraq. And his absolute anger and rage over that, but he doesn't really have a way to put it, or a person to project it on until this meeting, until he starts thinking along these lines and crosses paths with this Koch brother character.
Yeah, I found that actor, he's on screen for maybe about 2 or 3 minutes in the whole movie, but he chilled my blood. He was so scary and so believable as the kind of person
absolutely.
who could give two shits about anything. And so the question is, will God forgive us in that film? The answer is no.
Yeah.
I loved also the irony as well of the Ethan Hawke character basically becoming a suicide bomber.
Yep. I mean, that's why God won't forgive him, is because clearly he wanted him to go carry out martyrdom operations against Charles and David Koch, or whichever one of them is still alive. I don't know.
How did you interpret the ending of First Reformed, Will? That's an incredible ending.
I don't really know, actually. I would have to watch it again, but I love the movie. I still do. I think it's probably one of his best, but I didn't quite know how to I know what I really wanted to see, which was him set off that suicide vest. But I understand why that's not the case, and I think it's almost like his in Garden of Gethsemane moment where he chooses to have the cup taken away from him, and that he chooses to live as a man with Amanda Seyfried and maybe be a father to this child.
I read a very interesting interview with Schrader where he sort of clarified my suspicions about the ending. Originally, they'd showed the Amanda Seyfried character walking into the room as he's about to drink the bleach. They decided to just cut to her being there. And there's a suggestion that he did drink the bleach and that she's the vision of God. She's God's answer to his question. He's now blown himself up in a spiritual way. He's died. And that's heaven for him, is to be with her.
I think that's credible. Yeah, no, I definitely see that.
But I love that he left it to your interpretation. Some people were weird enough for you when they left the theater. But and that's why in the scenes earlier where they're knocking on the door and they're like, are you coming or not? They're holding up the ceremony for him. It's because he killed himself. And that's a vision from the afterlife. The last couple of minutes of the movie is not real.
And then also, in a religious sense, the answer to the question is that, yes, humanity is depraved. We are doomed. We are not forgiven, but we still have no choice but to try and to continue on. And the only way we really can have any hope of affecting the future is by continuing this tragedy and by having children and hoping for the best.
Well, this is the conundrum. The people that are I don't want to bring a child into this world. They're the actual people that should be thinking about having children, because there are so many people who have children who don't give a fuck about the world.
Yeah.
That's the conundrum, right? The people that are actually thinking about the future come to the conclusion that it's not right to bring a child into this world.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty bad situation.
my notes I wrote that First Reformed was Diary of a Based Country Priest.
Yeah.
Like, I really liked the scene with Cedric the Entertainer, where he's like having this big spiritual like wrestling match with him, and then Cedric just shuts it down by saying like, "This is you run a tourist shop." Like, you're not.
No, but and also what Cedric the Entertainer says to him in that scene is he quotes to him like, fucking from Genesis. He's like, like God has sent a flood before and he'll send one again.
Yeah.
Like, global warming, the end of the world, like the end of human civilization. It's nothing new. It's old news to God, and like that's just what he does. Like, it's just ours is not. We don't ask why. Like this has happened before, and it's like, yeah, like you should expect it, not be like terrified of it.
Just to get back a little bit to the auteur theory stuff with Schrader, is that he keeps making the same movie over and over again with these various. There's two movies that basically are the guideposts for his career in many ways. Pickpocket by Robert Bresson and his own screenplay for Taxi Driver. He's basically remade Pickpocket 4 times. American Gigolo, Patty Hearst, Light Sleeper, and The Card Counter all end with a man in jail holding hands with the woman.
Right.
Each film ends that way. And Pickpocket is a movie about a petty thief who gets, he's a pickpocket, but he gets mixed up with a racket of professional pickpockets. And he winds up meeting a girl who has a child with a man who she doesn't actually want to be with. And he discovers when he's finally picked up again for petty theft and put in jail that he loves her. And the movie ends with the realization of that love. And Light Sleeper, I don't know if you got a chance to see.
I have seen Light Sleeper.
It does the exact same ending as Pickpocket.
Yeah, with him with Willem Dafoe and Susan Sarandon in jail at the end.
Let's talk about Light Sleeper a little bit before we get into The Card Counter. I had never seen it before, and I watched it for this podcast, and I think it's an incredible movie.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I read a funny story that Dafoe wanted to know because Schrader had done Taxi Driver and then he did American Gigolo, but he wanted to know why this movie wasn't named after the profession of the protagonist. Schrader said, nobody wants to watch a movie called Drug Dealer.
American Cocaine Man. American Coke Guy. American I've Got a Guy.
Can you quickly describe what's going on in Light Sleeper?
Well, it's like Willem Dafoe is like, essentially he's a guy. He's the guy you call. It's like 80s New York. I mean, he's just like, he's a runner for Susan Sarandon, and he's just like, like he's a cocaine dealer. And it's like, I haven't seen it in a while, but like, yeah, it's like he gets involved with like a former girlfriend and then there's like what's his name, Victor Garber is this like very sinister guy who gets involved with her as well. It's just like his like this old flame of his coming back into his life like leads him to this kind of existential crisis and then a terrible tragedy. And then it's about like, like once again, like, what is a man in America in the 21st century? Like, is it your profession? Is it your job? Like, I mean, it's this feeling of being trapped and like not really knowing how to get out of it or what to do or who you are. I mean, like, I think that's kind of what's going on in Light Sleeper.
And this is another film that is about the man in the room, the man writing his diary. All of these movies that Schrader does about the lonely man in the room, we're given access to his inner thoughts. We're allowed to read his diary. We hear his voice as he's writing in the diary. There's a wonderful line at the very beginning of Light Sleeper where Dafoe's voiceover says, when a dealer starts keeping a diary, it's time to quit.
Yeah.
But we're dropped into this loner's world, this transitory existence that's powered by transactions. He's being driven around New York all night, every day, making these deals. And the movie has him dealing 19 grams to every customer because 19 is carrying and 20 was dealing in the laws in the state at the time. So we get to see him actually engaging with some of his clients. And we can also see that some of his clients should have stopped doing coke a long time ago. But we also get a sense that the Dafoe character and the Susan Sarandon character are older people in a young man's game. At the risk of this podcast turning into an all Steely Dan podcast, there's a real glamour profession vibe to the situation that John's in now. These are people who used to do drugs who have now turned into drug dealers and are still drug dealers even though they're in their like 40s at this point.
And also, like Defoe and his former lover, like they considered themselves, artists. They were like,
Yes.
they were on the downtown scene, musicians, painters, whatever. I forget what it was in the movie, but yeah, like that never panned out. But what did is facilitating the drug use of other cool downtown people.
But they all used to be the same age. And now these people are all older and all their clients are younger. There's an amazing scene where briefly we see David Spade as this one of his clients who Defoe has to sit around and listen to talk while he's coking himself up. And Schrader said that actually is based on him, because when he was, first doing drugs when he was a young man, coming out of his Calvinist minimalist upbringing and then suddenly immersing himself in film and drugs and, the lifestyle. He said that he used to buy drugs so that he had someone to talk to about God with.
That's the last conversation you should be having yacked up with your drug dealer. That's probably how Mike Lindell got an intervention from his fucking coke guys. He's probably talking about God one too many times.
So yeah, it's the early 90s and it feels kind of like the 70s and the 80s are over, and he's in this scene that is less glamorous. And even Susan Sarandon mentions at one point that crack basically took away all of the market that they used to be a part of. So like, what are they even doing still in this world? Sarandon makes the decision to move into cosmetics, which pretty much cuts John, the Willem Dafoe character, out of an existence, out of a purpose. Like, what's he supposed to do? Go into cosmetics? But yeah, it's a great film. But I read something very sad that when Schrader showed the film to Mike Medavoy, who was a major agent and film producer, when he was trying to find a distributor for Light Sleeper, he had a contractual option to watch the movie in case he wanted to release it. And he told Schrader afterwards, he said, "Paul, this is a great film, but we don't make these kinds of movies anymore."
Well, I mean, we get right back to his absolute rage at like at the state of the world and the people who run it, and like, what is one to do other than, I don't know, like drink bleach or strap on the fucking suicide vest?
And Schrader had sort of these wilderness years for a while. Like, did you ever see his Exorcist movie?
Yeah,
did you give that one a chance?
Yeah, it's not great. It's pretty. It was a. Yeah, he did have some wilderness. He had some lean years for a while.
You've seen The Walker. Can you tell us a little about that one?
The Walker was very good, actually. I would highly recommend it. It makes a very interesting, like all his movies, I think it makes an interesting companion piece to The Card Counter, because The Walker stars Woody Harrelson as, again, it's a movie where like the title of the movie is The Job. And his job is like, he occupies this, not really a job, it's more of his like social position, is he occupies this odd space in contemporary of the time, Bush administration era DC, as being this sort of very cultured gay Southern man who fills the role of walker, or sort of a non-sexual escort to the wives of powerful men in DC, who like they don't want to go to the latest charity gala. They've checked out of the marriage years ago, but they keep things up for appearances. So that Woody Harrelson is like, he plays bridge with these ladies. He takes them to the opera. He takes them to like social functions and gathering. He's just there to be the man on the arm of an older lady, an older and powerful and wealthy woman. And it's like, because of his sexuality, he's sort of not a threat, but he's also not taken seriously by anyone either. And then, of course, like, he gets involved in a murder and a conspiracy involving the husband of one of these women. But interestingly, in the movie, Woody Harrelson's his ex, or like his current or former lover, I don't quite remember what, is an artist who's like, like also an out gay man and an artist. And Woody Harrelson he's not like in the closet, but he is a sort of very conservative kind of like Southern gay gentleman. And his younger boyfriend is a visual artist who is doing like a gallery show about Abu Ghraib, and all the images that he's like painting or printing are from the Abu Ghraib photos. And there's a scene where he shows Woody Harrelson his work, or he's in his studio, and Woody Harrelson is very offended by it, and he's like, this is too controversial, you shouldn't show people like things that are that ugly. But like, once again, like, is a movie about DC and the Bush era. It's about power in Washington, D.C. and this man who, once again, is like, what's his purpose? How does he fit into this? Like, he's not taken seriously by anyone, but like he winds up getting involved and getting more involved than he'd like. But underneath it all is the specter of like real evil in America, like the real like evil of like not just like, as I said, in some sort of vague religious sense, but in a very real sense of like human beings who have like social security numbers and like mail they receive.
This leads us right over to the card counter, because the card counter is specifically, you wouldn't know it from the marketing,
Nope.
but it's specifically about...
I would have loved if they had done honest marketing for the card counter. What a fucking anchor around the neck of Focus Features that would have been.
Focus Features has wisely decided to play up the card game stuff, right? Like all they're doing a marketing campaign with the various characters of the movie. You know, those where they have 4 or 5 one sheets with the various characters. Too bad there's no Willem Dafoe one though.
as Major Gordo, the
fucking piece of work.
Yeah, the John Yoo figure. I mean, actually, he's like. John Yoo never got his hands personally dirty, but let's just say I was thinking a lot about John Yoo's name and address after I saw the card counter.
Definitely. There's even a sort of Google Earth joke, a Google Maps joke, where we get to see the house.
Wish you were here.
So I went in blind to see this movie. I just heard, new Schrader movie's excellent. Go see it. So I was like, good enough for me. I hadn't been to a movie theater since I saw Uncut Gems in December of 2019.
Wow, so this is your first movie theater
experience? This was my first
back?
movie.
Wow.
This was my first trip back to the cinemas. And I couldn't have picked
a special one, yeah.
But no, I couldn't have picked a better movie to be reintroduced to the beautiful Magic Lantern. The card counter, I knew I was in good hands right off the top with the opening credits. It's against a green felt background of the poker table. And you see the credits laid out in classical Hollywood style. But the first time where I was just struck by the hardships that a man like Schrader has getting work finished at this point. There were about 14 executive producers credited.
Yeah.
He had to stop production on the card counter 5 days before they were done because of the virus. We'll get to the Facebook post that he wrote about that later. But he was able to cobble together finishing money to actually finally finish the movie. I don't see any stitches, though. And when I watch the film, I don't see a very obvious they had to shoot this 9 months later moment in the movie. It's all done very well. But I realized when I saw 14 names in the executive producer credits that these were all the people that helped rescue Schrader.
Including Scorsese.
Right off the top, the god.
Yeah.
There is a weight a man can accrue.
This is where all the good stuff happens.
The weight created by his past actions. It is a weight which can never be removed.
All in.
You count cards, right?
I'm not that smart.
But you win. You need someone to stake you.
That's what you do. You run a stable.
I'm always looking for a good thoroughbred.
The card counter, can you give us a brief précis of what this movie's about?
Well, I mean, like, okay, so it's about essentially Oscar Isaac is a man who, like, once again, he's an island unto himself. He is a lonely man, unmoored from any kind of like social connection or purpose. And we're introduced to him as he sort of goes from casino to casino. He's counting cards, but like he makes it clear that like, yeah, they'll bounce you if you win too much, but as long as you keep your goals modest and win like $700-800, they'll leave you alone. So he's just traveling the country, living in motel room to motel room, going from casino to casino, playing cards, and like just eking out a bare existence through his skill at being a very good gambler. But like, I mean, the thing about this is that like what he says is really going on here is that like he's like, someone says like, why do you play cards? Like, 700 hands of cards a week or something like that. And he's like, because it fills the time. it passes the time. And one of the first things you see about him in the motels he live in is when he first goes into a motel, he like meticulously removes any sort of framed artwork or any sort of like anything specific to this, specific in a motel room kind of sense. He removes it and covers every piece of furniture with these like white sheets that he keeps with them and ties them off with like, you know, sort of packing twine, so that like he recreates for himself in every room he's in this institutionalized like prison feel. And you learn very early on in the movie, within like I think the first minute or two, that he is coming off an 8.5-year stretch in jail. Little by little, the movie reveals that he was in jail. He was in military prison for 8 years because essentially he was one of the grunts in the Abu Ghraib photos, like torturing prisoners in Abu Ghraib prison, and that's what he went to jail for. And the movie is about how through cards, like through games of chance, but also like most of the movie is actually about poker. It's this like it is the entryway into this idea of like interrogating another person, knowing what's in their soul, and with that, the idea of debt and weight. Like there's a part where he talks about like if you're a professional gambler and you get staked by like a stable where like you know a money backer will give you money to enter tournaments, and if you win you split it with them, but if you lose, like you didn't lose your own money, but what you get instead is now debt, which is called a weight. And the movie is about his sort of moral weight of him, his continued punishment of himself for the horrible torture that he was not just complicit in, but like actively carried out on behalf of Willem Dafoe's character, Major John Gordo, who was, very importantly, a civilian contractor hired by the military to teach torture techniques to soldiers at Abu Ghraib. But because he was a private contractor, he can't be held liable for crimes committed outside of America. So when the Abu Ghraib thing happens, as was the case in real life, all the people who were the architects of it, who gave the orders and taught these poor fucking assholes how to torture and break human beings, they skated off scot-free. They're living great lives now. And the people who did it and like followed their lead are the ones who ended up with jail sentences. So the movie is about this like his attempt to punish himself and then the chance that he might be able to forgive himself for what he did.
The name that he goes by as the card counter is William Tell, who, of course, is the famous man who shot an arrow into an apple on top of someone's head.
His son's head.
On his son's head. He happens upon this convention in a hotel for a global security conference that's going on. I took note of the Major John Gordo's subject of his keynote address, recent developments in interrogation and truthfulness.
Yeah.
like that doublespeak, truthfulness. He's a fucking liar.
Yeah.
And he's an actual war criminal who got away with it. And it's at this point that one of the most spectacular things I've seen in a movie in a long time, the nightmare that William Tell experiences.
The absolute,
let's talk about that.
It's I mean, like if you've seen the movie, it is the most memorable scene in the movie. It is the like actual portrayal of Oscar Isaac's memories of Abu Ghraib prison. And it's shot in this horrific like fisheye lens in which like the periphery of the frame melts to the side, so you were like always focused in this kind of like tunnel vision as colors and shapes and images sort of like melt away around you, and it's this long tracking shot that takes you through the like an Abu Ghraib cell block, as just like, you know, sort of in the periphery of your vision you see, you know, you see like broken human bodies, you see people being tortured, degraded, beaten. Everything is covered in shit and blood, and it is just like a pure vision of hell. It is a pure vision of like Dante's Inferno. It's
Hieronymus Bosch levels of horror, and shot in this heavily distorted fisheye effect. And I realized that it almost looks like you're supposed to wear a special headset to be able to see it normally. And in a way you are. You have to have the military mindset to be able to look at that as anything but grotesque.
Yeah, and one of the things Oscar Isaac talks about is like, he's like, you know, I mean, one of the first lines he says in voiceover in the movie is that like, I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who could like adapt to being in prison, or that I could like find myself like, you know, sort of surrendering or fitting in that kind of like institutionalized, incarceration. But also, I mean, he was also not a guy who imagined himself being the kind of guy who could torture another person for no reason or break another human being on someone else's orders. And what he finds is, lo and behold, yeah, I'm that person too. I could do that. And what he says is that, like, you know, when you're doing it, you're seeing and feeling it and smelling it every day, the only way to get through it is just to ride it and just embrace the absurdity and insanity of it, and just get through it. And then, of course, like, he gets through it, but then he has to go in jail, and then he has to live with himself for the rest of his life. And the movie is about how he lives with himself, because obviously you can only push it away for so long. And to me, the most memorable and the most searing part of the movie is when Oscar Isaac finally tells Kirk, we can get into the character he meets that, like, kicks off this whole kind of like Odyssey, or like this whole plan or change in his life. He finally tells him, like, he's like, you want to know what it was like? And then he finally tells it to him, and it's so astonishing because, like, the movie essentially takes place in either casinos, which are like have a lot of lights and colors, but like have in a certain way are every bit as like sterile and bland as every other room that's shown in the movie, which is either his intentionally like denuded motel rooms, which are meant to look like a fucking prison cell, or I'll never forget the conversation that he has with Kirk where he tells him what Abu Ghraib was actually like, takes place in this utterly bland fucking like just, you know, sort of nutrition hub for, you know, like at some strip mall called like the cook and chat, or like the chat and eat or something. It's like this,
like the chat and eat or something.
The chat and eat, and
the
it's
chat
like
and chew. It's called the chat and chew.
Chat and chew, and like every room in this movie, other than the casinos, essentially look like a prison cell. And it is just like the absolute kind of like bland monotony of like contemporary American life. But in this scene, it's just Oscar Isaac, and as he's talking, the camera slowly zooms in on him. And I got to say, just as an aside here, Oscar Isaac, I remember when I first saw Inside Llewyn Davis, I was like, this guy is the absolute truth. Like, this is like that was one of the best performances I've seen. I've never seen this guy before, never heard of him. I was like, holy shit, Oscar Isaac is that guy. And then he had a long period of like movie after movie where I was just like, fuck, man, like where's that Oscar Isaac that I saw in Inside Llewyn Davis? This movie, he is astonishing. Like, it just it brought me right back. Like, it's just like, to totally forgive all the movies of his that I saw that I did not like, or I thought I was like, what are you doing here? This just like, where's that fucking talent that I saw in Inside Llewyn Davis? But he is so good in this movie. And that scene where he just talks about, like, the first thing he tells him about what Abu Ghraib was like is he's like, you have to understand the smell of like gas, shit, blood, sweat, smoke, like everything. And it's just that it's just always there, and you never escape it. And it's just it's a moment that's so searing and so fucking memorable. And like, that's the other thing, like the dialogue between Ethan Hawke and the young man at the beginning of First Reformed. Schrader, as a writer and a director, is better than almost anyone I can think about of imbuing scenes of just dialogue or just monologue with such intensity and such just like a riveting power to it that like is really unforgettable.
I saw that movie called A Most Violent Year a few years ago.
It should be called a most boring movie. A slightly upsetting week is what that movie should be called.
I called it A Most Violent Month. That was a real letdown. But,
oh God, yeah.
But what I want to say is that the guy is so clearly, obviously trying to be Sidney Lumet. But I realized while I was watching the movie that Oscar Isaac is one of the only modern American actors who would have comfortably fit in a classic Sidney Lumet movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was also sad when I would watch things like The Rise of Skywalker and see Oscar Isaac sighing and saying, somehow the Emperor has returned. Yeah. I was joking in the card counter. It's like, somehow John Gordo has returned.
But you want to talk about the real fucking evil of Empire? It's not that crusty old bitch shooting lightning out of his fingers. It's the major John Gordos of the world. And you know what? Like The Rise of Skywalker, they haven't fucking gone away. We didn't even get a chance to kill these assholes for the first time.
But yeah, so Oscar Isaac, like, give this man an Oscar nomination because, give Isaac the Oscar, if you will, if I can get it in my Tinseltown. This is a classic American actor. Like, this is a kind of performance that you used to get routinely from people like James Caan.
Yeah, definitely.
So he's really good in this movie. And I also want to say that the other two main principals in this are also excellent. Tiffany Haddish playing La Linda.
Well, Linda, she's got jokes. She got jokes.
She gets better as the movie goes along. You're not quite sure whether the romance is going to actually work out in this movie. You start believing in it as the movie continues.
I think so. I mean, like I like Tiffany Haddish a lot, but like, you know, if you were looking for a quibble in this movie, her character is maybe the one thing that like stands out a little bit, or like maybe it takes some getting used to, or it takes like maybe a slight hurdle to clear her like understanding of like how she fits into the movie or who her character is. But by the end of it, I found the romance between them to be affecting. It worked. I like the scene where they walk through that kind of like Mishima style. Like sort of Christmas light lit park, where like everything is in these like it reminded me very much of like the Temple of the Golden the Golden Pavilion from Mishima, like the kind of set design work that was in that movie.
It reminded me, I said it was like they went to a garden in the Tron universe, because the camera is on a what do you call it, on a drone, speaking of the war in Iraq. And it floats up over this very artificial garden with all these LED lights. It's like really, it would be kind of abomination to walk through visually, because it's also, is it in Las Vegas? Where are they again in that part? I don't think they're in Las Vegas.
It's one of those other...
It feels very Vegas.
Yeah, I don't think it was Vegas. It was just like one of these other places where there are casinos in America that they go to. Could be Florida, could be Connecticut. Who knows? Like I said, like the America of this movie is totally interchangeable. There is no real like look to any of it other than just like a boredom and bleakness at night.
But this is the pure cinema moment in the card counter, because we have been dealing with this beige and gray and oppressive American life, which, by the way, is the life that the Abu Ghraib war crimes were committed to defend.
Yeah, that's another really dark part of this movie.
We need to also talk about the fact that this movie seems to take place in the World Poker Tour universe, which, by the way, launched in America in the year 2002.
Yeah.
I think that's very significant. It's one of the big sort of American cultural products that was after the 9/11 attacks, and as the war was starting, all of a sudden everyone was interested in poker.
Yeah. No, it was, I mean, in Texas No Limit Hold'em poker, and I think that the Texas No Limit thing was, I think, like something keyed into like our new adoration for George W. Bush as the Texas cowboy, sort of riding herd over the bad guys, and he's willing to go all in for America and lose spectacularly. And let us not forget that like Oscar Isaac in this movie, his, I don't know if you want to say rival, but I mean, it's not really like level of an antagonist, but his rival on the World Poker Tour is a Ukrainian guy who dresses only in American flag regalia. And whenever he wins a hand, his sort of goons and entourage chant, USA, USA, USA. And it's returned to again and again in this movie as this horrific dirge, this chant of the damned, that like every fucking letter just cuts Oscar Isaac to his core because of what he knows it represents.
Yeah, it's like, this is a problem with post 9/11 patriotism, is how phony it is and how actually un-American it is. Right down to having a Ukrainian guy calling himself Mr. USA.
Yeah, and it's just like, and why do they chant USA? Because he won a hand and we won a round of poker and is winning money from suckers and fucking desperate and hopeless sitting across a fucking table at a casino.
And that we also find out in this movie a few little tidbits about the behind the scenes of spectacles like the World Poker Tour, which is that they're not even actually playing for the money that they're playing poker for.
That's all for TV. Yeah,
that's all for TV. The chips are just chips. They've all been promised a certain amount of money for every level that they get to in the tournament.
Yeah.
So it's all bullshit.
Yep.
And I love the scenes in the movie where we see Oscar Isaac walking into this giant cathedral of poker players, this depressing, badly lit room full of suckers.
Yeah.
that eventually becomes a table in the room with the 4 people who are left. And it's so humiliating when Mr. USA beats him.
Yeah, no,
it's once again betrayed by America.
Yeah, and like I mean, again, like as I said earlier, like Schrader uses the idea of card games, but also like gambling as this kind of stand-in for the act of interrogation. And like particularly in poker, which he makes clear is like you're not playing against the house in poker, you're playing against the other players. And like, yeah, you have to have like, unlike blackjack, which is like that you can count cards in blackjack because it is just it really is literally only about math to a certain degree. In poker, having a knowledge of what cards are in play helps you with the probabilities of how you make your bet. But ultimately, what you need to know in poker is the person sitting across from you. Mm-hmm. That's what you're gambling on. You're gambling on your understanding of a stranger based on them trying to give you nothing. And there's a very good bit of voiceover where Oscar Isaac's character explains that like a good poker player can see into your soul no matter what. You could have the mirrored glasses on. You could have headphones on. You could be wearing a hoodie. You could be wearing a fucking mask. A good poker player, when you sit down next to them at the table, will see that thing that you're trying to hide. Will see who you are that even you're not aware about, or that you try to hide from other people. And like in his past profession and the fucked up thing is that like they make it clear that like, as in reality, the people that they were torturing in Abu Ghraib, they weren't sitting on pocket aces. There was nothing that they could give them that, like, even if they wanted to, that could have gotten them out of that situation. They weren't sitting on any big secret. It was no fucking like it was no magic trick to get anything out of them, because like the things they got out of them were just stuff that they made up, as you would do if you were being tortured. That's the absolute absurdity and horror of it all.
Yeah, and so ultimately in this movie, the poker games are as artificial as the war on terror was.
Yeah, definitely.
His name is William Tell, and a tell is a key strategy for winning poker.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So speaking on that, of the idea of the tell, I mean, I think like I interpret it to as like a certain level that one of the reasons, like Oscar Isaac says, like, he learns to play poker, he learns to count cards in prison because, you had 8.5 years. Like, I mean, that's what you do in prison to entertain yourself and keep track of like the days or just pass the time is through cards. Like, that's how you measure. I mean, like, you don't count hours, minutes, or days. It's like you count cards, you count hands. That's how you measure time passing. Is like, the deficit or, surplus that you've accrued in cigarettes or whatever. And I sort of like thought like one of the reasons like he is such a good poker player is like both that, like his past, as breaking and interrogating people, but also that like he himself doesn't have the same tells as an average person, or maybe has no tells at all because he doesn't have a soul anymore. Like, he's not a person anymore because of the shit that he did. Mm-hmm.
I loved also, just to get back a little bit to the Abu Ghraib part of our conversation, I thought it was very profound that the moment that destroyed Oscar Isaac's life is captured in a very offhanded way. We see a montage of him committing atrocities at Abu Ghraib, holding his prisoners up for a pose, for a photo, and smoking and then blowing the smoke in the unconscious guy's face. Schrader always cuts to the next shot after every camera flash. These are the incriminating photos that the whole world saw and think he's a terrible person. We don't get to see the actual incriminating photos because we don't need to.
Yeah.
But like, that's the difference between Oscar Isaac doing 8.5 years in a military prison and Gordo walking away scot-free, is Gordo knew not to be in any of the photographs.
Yeah.
His grunts didn't know that. What I love about this movie too is that it was released on September 10th, 2021.
Wow, like Mulholland Drive 20 years ago, right before
9/11 and right after the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan.
And that's what I mean. That's kismet in a lot of ways. I'm sure it was perhaps slightly planned. I mean, it's not the best marketing ploy for this movie in particular, but that's what I mean about like Schrader is like one of the few American filmmakers that he's not doing like shoot and crime movies about how hard it is to be a fucking troop. I mean, like that's not the point of this movie.
Yeah.
But like he is going like directly at the throat of like the war on terror, the war in Iraq, and what it represents to like the soul of this nation, which is, as we said earlier, we are not forgiven by God and we don't have a soul anymore. We are a husk now because of the shit that we've done. If we ever had one to begin with, it's long gone at this point.
We should talk about our third character, Kirk, spelled with a C, played by Ty Sheridan, who's really good in this movie.
He is very good too. He, he's the person who Oscar Isaac meets him when he sort of like wanders into the security conference, the presentation being done by his former commanding officer and, living unincarcerated war criminal Willem Dafoe. And Ty Sheridan's character sees him there and recognizes him. And he's like, let's meet up later. We have something to talk about. And it's revealed that Kirk is the son of one of the men that Oscar Isaac served with at Abu Ghraib, who has, since coming home from the war, become an alcoholic, beat both his son and his wife before the mother, just leaves because she can't take it anymore, and then ultimately commits suicide and kills himself. And that Ty Sheridan's character has become obsessed with the Abu Ghraib case and with Willem Dafoe as like the object. Like he is the Travis Bickle. Like he is the character that is imagining for himself this act of violent retribution. And he explains to Oscar Isaac, he's like, I thought you might be interested in this because this guy fucked you over the same way he did me and my father and like turned my life into hell and, has faced no consequences for it. So I'm going to kidnap, torture, and murder him. And Oscar Isaac sees in him like obviously a kindred spirit in that he's like, I spent lots of hours fantasizing about the same thing, but he wants to save him from like the same fate that he's wound up at. And he wants him to like just show him what his life is like. And he wants to give him a chance and win money and basically give him the money so that he can go back to college and forgive his mother and have like a normal life away from like not forever tainted by this evil. And yeah, like it's funny because like he tries to like talk it out with him, like so what exactly is your plan? And he's like, I don't know, we'll shoot him with a dart gun. And it's just like it's so clear he doesn't have any idea what he's doing. But yeah, like he is the Travis Bickle character of this movie. He has this fantasy of violent retribution and like sort of and self renewal and ultimately self negation. That like he's like I dropped out of college, like nothing matters. I just want to kill and torture this asshole because if I don't do it, no one else will.
But isn't this a relatable person? Like, don't you think
absolutely.
that these people are all over America? These like, directionless young men, right? He's on his way to destroying his own life. And like a lot of Schrader movies, the main character sees a possibility of his own redemption through the rescue of an innocent.
Yeah. And like I think there's a line he says in it towards the end of the movie, Oscar Isaac's character in his voiceover in his diary, where he says, the feeling of forgiving yourself and being forgiven by another person is functionally the same. It feels the same way. It achieves the same effect. And it's like this is what he sees in Kirk, a chance to forgive someone else, to forgive himself. He sees a chance at redemption. And like that is why he agrees, like because he in the beginning of the movie he eschews anything like the professional poker circuit or the World Series of Poker or being staked by anyone because he doesn't want any connections to anyone. He doesn't want any weight. He doesn't want any debt more than what he's already accrued on himself. But like the reason he says yes to this is that he wants to and does give all of his money to this guy Kirk to just give him one chance not to destroy his life.
That's Dudes Rock though, dude.
Yeah, yes.
Let's talk about the Dudes Rock components of this. First of all, it's very key in a Dudes Rock relationship is that these two guys meet each other and then the kid says, here's my phone number, give me a call. And then at like 2 a.m, Oscar Isaac calls the guy and says, meet me in the bar downstairs. And they have a drink together at 2:30 in the morning. That is what dudes do. You get up at 2:30 in the morning and meet your dude if he needs you.
And then, they go on the road together and Oscar Isaac he gives him some game. Like he sort of like hips him to like his own life and hips him to like gambling. But I mean, he also tells him the truth that about his father, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And that another Dudes Rock moment is when he goes to visit Kirk's hotel room and you opens the door, and the place, he's probably only been there for 2 days, but it already looks like a bomb went off in it. It looks like there's like takeout containers everywhere. And then Oscar Isaac opens up the curtains, and we see that it's probably like 11:30 in the morning or something. I thought it was like 4 in the morning.
And no, when he first goes into Kirk's hotel room, he says, you live like this? It's like the classic damn bitch, you live like this meme. And then at the very end, in which he lets Kirk into his fucking even more insane hotel room with sheets covering everything, Kirk says, you live like this?
Yeah. This is a super important Dudes Rock moment, is when in the third act, when it looks like Oscar Isaac is going to actually torture Kirk.
Yep.
Dramatizations are very important in this film, and are also very important for the catharsis that's sought by the protagonist. These poker games are dramatizations. What he does to Kirk is a dramatization, where he actually ties him up and looks like he's got information on Kirk. That's what we think, is that Oscar Isaac's figured out that Kirk's pulling some kind of a scam. But as it turns out, he wants to fulfill a deal that they made earlier in the film, which was talk to your mother. And if you talk to your mother, I'll go and get laid. Which is important Dudes Rock, like cementing of a Dudes Rock friendship, is like helping your boy, and then your boy helps you.
And also, essentially having sex with each other via proxy,
Yes.
via an unrelated third party, woman in this case. But that's just to make it legit. But yeah, like, I mean, this movie is about, and at the end with Willem Dafoe, what does he say to him? He says, "We're going to do a historical reenactment, you and I."
Yeah.
And the scene with Ty Sheridan, where he basically he scares the shit out of him. It's a real scared straight moment. He puts on the latex gloves. He's got a bag with fucking tools in it. And he's like, he gives him, like, he interrogates him. He does the thing to him that, like, he'd only been alluding to the entire movie. And he's like, if you really want to know, like, this is the truth of it. And he attempts to scare him into just being like, I'm giving you all this money, call your mother, go back to college. And like, that's all you, if you do that, like, we're straight. You don't owe me anything. But if you fuck it up and you don't do this, then, like, I'm going to finish out this historical reenactment, and you're going to see what this shit is really about. Unfortunately, that doesn't work.
No, sadly enough. But this is also a very important obstacle in Tell's ability to forgive himself, is that he puts a human being through the process that he went to prison for, and why he could conceivably even go to hell, to save him. He frees a prisoner, which he was never able to do in the army. Which I thought, I was surprised, because that scene looked a little bonkers as it started. Like, I didn't understand the motivation for it. But then all of a sudden the clouds lifted when he finally said, here's the money, here's even more money. You have to do this or else. It was like tough love, but it was also, you realize that he did all this for someone. He finally sacrificed his own time and his own energy to rescue someone.
Yeah, and like you said, you're right. Like, he frees a prisoner. I mean, this is someone who is sitting across from him. Like, so much of this movie is about people sitting across from each other and trying to divine, the truth of their soul, either yourself or your opponent or your prisoner. And he has someone completely under his thumb. And what does he do? Like, not only does he give him all his money, but he lets him go. He doesn't torture him. He doesn't follow through on the thing that he's trained to do and been ordered to do, and that he's kind of ordered himself to do in this case, is like to free a prisoner.
And he's now also given himself permission to go kiss Tiffany Haddish.
Yeah.
Which he should have done, like, in real 3.
He should have done that 40 minutes ago in the movie.
So yeah, I thought it was profoundly moving. It was like the way that, and then continuing on with the dramatization, yes, he goes to Gordo's house because the kid fucks up. Like, the kid takes off and basically breaks the promise that he made to Tell, and goes to go do Gordo, to finish Gordo off. Gordo winds up killing him in self-defense. But now Tell goes over to Defoe's house, and I love the scene where Defoe comes home and walks into his house and finds that the whole place has been done up the way that William Tell does his hotel room. All the furniture is covered in white blankets, twine, and he says, "You have a choice. I can kill you now, or you and I can go into the next room, and we're going to do a little dramatic reenactment of our time in Abu Ghraib."
And now this is not shown. None of it is shown. You hear the agony in the other room, but it only fixates on the sheet covered sort of negative space. But it's clear, like at the end, like Oscar Isaac kills Willem Dafoe, but he's also been tortured himself. It's not that like he can't just take pure revenge and just torture this man. Because like like he has to be tortured himself, because like there's a line in the movie, I think, where he says, like, how does one determine the limits of punishment? Mm-hmm. Like, how does one decide like when someone has been punished enough, or what is a just punishment? And for himself, that's obviously an open question. And I thought like that. I mean, there's a scene in the movie that's a flashback to when his time in prison, where he just starts fucking with this guy and like taking food off his tray in the cafeteria or whatever, and just clearly antagonizes this guy into just beating the shit out of him. And he's like, I often wonder if that guy's still alive, or if he's around, or if I could contact him to finish the job. And I almost thought at the end that like he was basically going to let Willem Dafoe torture him to death and kill him. And I mean, like, it could have gone that way, but I mean, like, he comes out and he's bloodied and mangled as well. So it's not so simple an act of just pure revenge or righteous justice. It has to be meted out on him equally, along with Willem Dafoe.
It's Calvinism,
Yeah.
And Isaac walks out of the room to call 911, and it looks like two of his fingers are basically busted.
Yeah.
That was the detail that I fixated on. It looked like he actually had two fingers nearly removed in that fight. We see his hand again in another scene afterwards, and I was actually wondering whether or not he was going to have those fingers amputated. They look so badly mangled. But I think that it was brilliant of Schrader not to show us any of the fight.
Because, like, I mean, he already showed you it. He already showed you it in the fucking the hell scene. And there's like there's two sequences of that. Like, he's already shown it to you.
There's that second flashback in the Abu Ghraib nightmare stuff where the Defoe and the other soldier they don't look human. Like, they're all squeezed down.
Yeah, they're all squat.
Did you see that video that Bolsonaro put up when he was in the hospital that looked like that?
Yes. It very much reminded me of that.
All I could think of in that scene was that weird fucked up Bolsonaro video, which of course is not wrong. The end of the movie, Oscar Isaac's now back in jail. Although I'm not sure why he's in a military prison again. If he
that was a question.
Civilian contractor.
That was a question I had. He's back at the same, like, at Leavenworth or whatever, and it's like he's no longer in the military, and he just did straight up felony murder, as a citizen of the country. I don't think he would be back in military prison, but
whatever. We'll let it go.
Yeah.
I thought it was a beautiful ending and a beautiful technique of an ending where La Linda comes to see him in jail. And just like the end of Pickpocket and just like the end of several Paul Schrader movies, the movie ends with the two of them holding hands. But at this time in the movie, it's their two fingers touching the glass that separates them.
And like, you don't really know whether he's like the frame has been frozen or it's static, or whether it's just like it is they're just filming two fingers touching in between glass.
It's in slow motion, but if you stare at it long enough, you realize that it's a shot. It's not a freeze frame.
It's not a freeze frame. It is a shot. It's just held.
And it's a shot that is held. And I just thought of just Isaac or their hand doubles just standing there touching glass for 4 minutes. But
scrolling on your phone with the other one, just like, okay, got the shot. All right.
But I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful ending. A very hopeful ending. For Schrader, this felt like a vaguely positive conclusion in some ways.
Yeah, because I mean, like, because they still, I mean, like, these are two people who still care about each other, and that Oscar Isaac's character has connected with another human being, and he has something to live for. There's something decent in his life.
I want to touch base with you about this incredible Facebook post that Schrader wrote. The movie had to stop production because of the pandemic, and Schrader wrote on Facebook, "Production halted 5 days before wrap by my pussified producers because an LA day player had the coronavirus. Myself, I would have shot through hellfire rain to complete the film. I'm old and asthmatic. What better way to die than on the job?"
I mean, like, he's like all his main characters. I mean, he wants to punish himself. That's why he keeps posting on Facebook. He wants to be punished.
About a month before the movie came out, on the day of the bombshell report that accused your governor, Andrew Cuomo, of misconduct and harassment of female staffers, Schrader offered up this helpful query on Facebook. He wrote, "Is it really so hard to keep from touching attractive women in your presence if they work for you? Yes, it is. The evidence seems conclusive, but it can be done."
Does Natasha Kinski have Facebook? I'd like to hear her thoughts on this. Well, I mean, famously, I mean, her hilarious comment. She goes, "What was it like? He wanted to marry her," and then she just goes, "Paul, I sleep with all my directors, and you were particularly difficult."
You know, what was funny is that Tiffany Haddish apparently kept tormenting Paul Schrader because she wants him to make Cat People 2 starring her.
Yes, please do. Please do.
So he was getting really frustrated that she kept talking about cat people with him while they were making the movie.
Cat People, by the way, I mean, it's sort of the odd movie out, and it's not really about the same themes you've been talking about, but it is, and it is one of the... If you want to see a movie that achieves cocaine madness on film, Cat People is it.
Yeah.
Cat People is all the way there. It's fucking great. I love Cat People so much. But the other really funny Paul Schrader card counter Facebook post is that he was like, he wanted Kevin Spacey to be the lead in the card counter. And he had another Facebook post where he was like, hasn't this guy suffered enough? Like, did he do anything that was that bad? Are we going to keep punishing this guy forever when he can't make a movie again? I'd love to work with him.
Right after he wrote the tweet about how, you know, you could conceivably touch attractive women if they work for you. Then like 3 hours later, he posted on Facebook, "Focus Features has asked me to chill on Facebook for a month. No problem. See you on the other side. Card counter opens September 10th. Yeah, he was. A24 was in their Oscar season mentality for First Reformed when he said, "Why can't I cast Kevin Spacey in my next movie?" And then it was like, "Bye, everybody," like a Poochie style. Like, suddenly disappears. I'll put the link in the show description of the Twitter account Paul's Posts, which gives you pretty much everything that Schrader has to say. The pinned tweet is, Schrader wrote, "I enter unwashed into a world that disrespects me and despises my values." Which is total drill. That's a drill tweet for sure.
But I mean, would you want anything else from a great artist?
No.
You know? Yeah, God, no.
My favorite Paul Schrader tweet of recent vintage was this summer when he wrote in all caps, "In your mind, who are the 3 hottest, most talented Asian brackets, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, in that order, close brackets, actresses age 30 to 35 now working?" Schrader is what we would call a rice king. Do you know the term rice king?
I don't think so.
That's white guys who are obsessed with Asian women.
Okay, I get it.
Have you seen the incredible music video that Schrader did for Bob Dylan's song Tight Connection that he shot in Tokyo?
No, I have not.
I'll put that in the show description too. Yeah, Paul Schrader directed a video for Bob Dylan's Empire Burlesque album while he was making Mishima. And it's an insane music video with Bob Dylan looking very confused walking around Tokyo.
I'll have to check that out.
So good. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Schrader, and it was a pleasure to get caught up on these films. A couple that I hadn't seen, and to see The Card Counter, which right now stands as the best movie of 2021. I don't know if anyone's going to top it.
I would say, have you seen Riders of Justice yet?
No, not yet. That's the Mads Mikkelsen?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that to me is I'll be shocked if I see a better movie this year than Riders of Justice. Card Counter is definitely up there, but I will just say see Riders of Justice.
Oh, and one other Paul Schrader, amazing Paul Schrader Facebook post. He wrote in March of 2019, "I watched First Reformed again tonight. I can find no fault with the film. I'm stunned by the fact that I accomplished such a thing."
I agree. Hats off. Hats off to the lad. He still got it. I mean, it's inspiring to like see a guy like, because you know he had some doldrums in his career, but like he's Fucking, I don't know how old he is now, but man, like
75.
75, but he's still got that gas. He's still throwing heat out there. I mean, and not only that, but like faster than maybe he's ever thrown in his career. With First Reformed and the card counter, like he's throwing fucking gas across the plate, and I find that very inspiring. And he just doesn't give a fuck. He just doesn't give a fuck, which I love.
Will, did you give two shits about the Canadian election results?
Not really.
Did the Canadian election cross your mind at all?
The guy who breathes through his balls lost.
Yeah.
So that was the only thing I clocked, but it just seemed like, just Trudeau back in power, minority government. I mean, it really did not register much of me.
I was very disappointed that there were only 950 seaman retention soldiers in St. John, Newfoundland.
No, I mean, I guess like the PPC party didn't win a single seat or whatever,
No.
and they're all crying like, obviously fraud as a result of that. I think Paul Schrader should make a movie about seaman retention warriors or a seaman retention warrior. I mean, honestly, Oscar Isaac is kind of a Volcel for most of this movie. So, I mean, he's already dealing. I mean, like I said, like all his movies are about the same thing, but he needs to make another movie about breathing through your testicles and never coming.
I would love the diary entry of Nakula Das. I would love to read his diary.
Yeah. Day 240, still haven't jacked off.
I feel that the change is coming in me. I don't even look at my penis anymore. Oh, and the other amazing thing about Nakula Das is that they did a story about him, Mr. Ball, breathing through your balls, and he said that they were trying to discredit him because he was a threat to the to the establishment. Meanwhile, his Twitter bio says that he's a seaman retention soldier.
Well, of course, the media would focus on that.
Can you recommend a favorite Schrader that we may not have talked about on this show?
We talked about autofocus. We did bring up Cat People at the end, which I highly recommend. It's sort of the odd one out, but it's wow, a lot of psychology in that movie too. Just pure cocaine madness. Mishima, obviously, and The Walker. I'll throw that one out there. I mentioned that briefly. Again, a good companion piece with the card counter. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably not Patty Hearst, we mentioned that as well.
That's a good one.
Yeah, they're all fire.
I'll recommend The Comfort of Strangers, the film that takes place in Venice that Schrader made sort of on his downward slide, with an all-timer performance by Christopher Walken as a gentleman who constantly talks about men and the glory of men, and he always talks about his father's black mustache. He's not a very nice person, as it turns out at the end of the movie, but he has tons of incredible actors' monologues. And if you're a huge Walken head, you have to see this movie. Anything our listeners should know about what's going on? You had an all-star week this week on Chapo.
Yeah, fucking just stacked with interviews. We got some more fun stuff to come. So watch this space at Will Menaker, and I think I'm Will Menaker on Letterboxd or CodyDad420 on Letterboxd. I don't know.
Yeah.
Check me out on Letterboxd if you want tips and tricks on cultivating movie mindset in your own self and being.
Yes, you inspired me actually to put together an inarguable Dudes Rock canon. You may have a Dudes Rock canon going yourself, but there are absolutely no mistakes on my Dudes Rock list. So please check it out. I don't make mistakes when it comes to this subject. It's
endorsed and co-signed by yours truly.
Will, you're welcome back anytime.
Absolutely.
You name the topic, and please come back.
Always a joy. Thanks for having me on.
Before we go, I just wanted to remind the listeners that we do have a Junk Filter Patreon. We've had some spectacular guests for our bonus episodes, including Jared Yates Sexton, David Roth, Jacob Bacharach, Suze Kempner, Will Sloan, and many more. You can sign up at patreon.com/junkfilter. The original music for this program was provided by Marker Starling. My name is Jesse Hawken. Thank you so much for listening.